A widowed millionaire returns home unexpectedly for lunch, believing he would face just another day of silence in his mansion. But everything changes when he enters the dining room and sees the nanny sitting at the table with 4 little girls, eating plain rice as if they had been starving for months. The shock is so great that he faints upon realizing that these children are identical to his deceased wife as a child. Upon waking, he understands that this was not just a scare, but the beginning of the most devastating and transformative revelation of his life. The midday sun in New York City streamed through the windows of the Upper East Side mansion as William Sterling parked his black Mercedes in the garage. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had an important meeting scheduled for that afternoon, but something had pulled him back home, an unsettling intuition he couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the accumulated fatigue of months running the company without a break, or perhaps it was just the inexplicable desire to see the face of little Lily, his 6-year-old daughter who was all he had left in the world. He loosened his Italian tie as he walked down the marble hallway. The mansion was too quiet for a weekday. Usually he would hear the voice of Eleanor, the nanny, playing with Lily in the garden or the playroom. Today, however, there was only a heavy silence that echoed with his every step. William had hired Eleanor 6 months ago, after the last nanny quit, claiming she couldn't handle his unpredictable hours. Eleanor was different. She was only 23, but she showed an impressive maturity. Coming from a humble family in a small town in West Virginia, she had moved to New York City in search of work after losing her parents at a young age. She had no college degree, but she had something no diploma could teach, a genuine heart and a dedication that went beyond professional duty. Lily had taken to her immediately. In recent months, William had noticed how his daughter smiled more, how she had started playing and laughing in a way she hadn't since Isabel, her mother, had passed away 5 years ago. The complicated birth of quadruplets had taken his wife and their 4 babies. William had barely survived that pain. It was only Lily, who was just a year-old at the time, who had kept him anchored to reality. He headed towards the dining room, guided by a low murmur of children's voices. What he saw when he walked through the door made his world stop. Sitting at the imposing mahogany table used for formal dinners and business meetings was Eleanor. But she wasn't alone. Around her, seated on makeshift chairs with cushions to reach the proper height, were 4 identical little girls. 4, small, with dark brown hair falling in messy curls, wearing clothes that William immediately recognized as being made from his own old shirts, patched and transformed into children's dresses. Eleanor held an old aluminum pot, serving yellow rice onto colorful plastic plates. The girls ate with a voracity that chilled his blood. It wasn't the normal hunger of children. It was the hunger of those who know scarcity, of those who have gone days without being sure when the next meal would come. Time seemed to freeze. William felt his legs weaken. The room began to spin. He reached out to lean on the doorframe, but it was too late. The floor rose up to meet him and darkness swallowed him whole. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the living room sofa. Eleanor was kneeling beside him, her face pale with worry, holding a glass of water with trembling hands. Her brown eyes were wide with fear. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't call the police. I haven't done anything wrong, I swear." William sat up slowly, his head still spinning. Through the ajar dining room door, he could see the 4 little girls watching him with huge, frightened eyes, and it was in that moment that his heart nearly stopped again. Those faces. He knew those faces. He stood up abruptly, ignoring Eleanor's protest, and walked to the dining room like a man in a trance. The girls shrank back, clinging to each other, but William wasn't seeing 4 unknown children. He was seeing Isabel, his late wife at 4 years old, exactly like in the old photos his mother-in-law had shown him years ago. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same delicate nose, the same dimple on her chin. Even the way one of them bit her lower lip when she was nervous was identical to Isabel's habit. William approached slowly, kneeling, to the girl's level. One of them, the closest, had a small birthmark on her neck, just below her left ear. A crescent-shaped mark. The same mark Isabel had, the same mark Isabel's mother had, the same hereditary mark that ran through generations of the Ashford family. "Who are they?" William managed to ask, his voice hoarse and unrecognizable. Eleanor, for God's sake, who are these children? Eleanor was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She approached slowly, as if afraid he would explode at any moment. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice trembling so much she could barely form the words. "I know this sounds crazy. I know you're going to think I've lost my mind, but you have to listen to me. You have to give me a chance to explain." Explain. The word came out as an order. Eleanor took a deep breath, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. 6 months ago, before I started working here, I used to volunteer at St. Jude's Home for Children, a public orphanage in the Bronx. I would bring clothes, toys, sometimes food. It was my way of giving back, you know. Because when I lost my parents, I needed help too. William listened, but his eyes remained fixed on the 4 identical girls who watched him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. One day, I was in the recreation room when I saw these 4 girls playing alone in a corner. They were so similar I thought I was seeing quadruple, but what really caught my attention was their faces. I had just started working for you the week before, and there was a photo of Mrs. Isabel in the living room from when she was a child, the one next to the wedding portrait. William nodded slowly. He knew the photo. His mother-in-law, Margaret Ashford, had placed it there years ago, saying she wanted Lily to know her mother at every age. The resemblance was impossible to ignore, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength as the story unfolded. Identical. Not just similar, Mr. Sterling. Identical. And then I saw the birthmark on one of them. The same mark Mrs. Isabel had in the photos. "That's impossible," William murmured, but even as he said the words, he knew he was lying to himself. The evidence was right there, in front of him, 4 small living versions of Isabel. "I thought the same thing," Eleanor said quickly, "so I started asking discreet questions. I talked to the caregivers, the director. I looked through the records, and I discovered something that changed everything." She paused as if gathering courage for what was to come. "These girls were admitted to the orphanage 5 years ago. 4 newborn babies, premature, in critical condition. According to the records, they were found abandoned at a public hospital. But when I investigated further, I talked to an old nurse who worked on the case. She told me the truth." William's heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. "The babies weren't abandoned, Mr. Sterling. They were born in a crowded hospital during a chaotic shift. They were born in critical condition, with almost no vital signs. In the confusion and desperation of that night, they were declared—" Eleanor swallowed hard, unable to continue. "Declared what?" William stood up, his voice rising. "Deceased," Eleanor whispered. But it wasn't true. Minutes later, when the team went to prepare the procedures, they realized the babies were breathing. Faintly, but they were alive. William felt the floor open up, beneath his feet again. "What are you saying, that these girls are—" "Your daughters," Eleanor completed, tears falling again. "The quadruplets you believe passed away with Mrs. Isabel 5 years ago. They survived. But by the time the doctors realized their mistake, it was too late. The family had already been informed. The funeral had already happened. And the hospital panicked." William staggered, leaning on the table. The girls watched him, still frightened, not understanding what was happening. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone contact me?" "I don't know all the details," Eleanor admitted. "The nurse said there were conversations, discussions about how to proceed, but in the end the babies were sent into the system for adoption. Someone decided it would be for the best." "Someone decided," William repeated, his voice filled with a cold rage he didn't know he possessed. "Someone stole 5 years of my life with my daughters. Someone let me believe they were—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked again at the 4 girls, now seeing not only the resemblance to Isabel, but also traces of himself, the shape of one of their ears, the line of another's forehead, small details that, together, formed an undeniable picture. "When I found out," Eleanor continued, "I didn't know what to do. I was just a new nanny with no concrete proof, no resources. Who would believe me? So I started the adoption process. But those processes take years. In the meantime, I visited the girls every week, brought them food, clothes, everything I could on my salary. And 3 months ago, when the orphanage became overcrowded and the conditions worsened, I couldn't stand to see them suffer anymore. You brought them here, William concluded. Eleanor nodded, ashamed. I know it was wrong. I know. I should have told you. But I was so afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you would fire me and the girls would go back to that horrible place. So I hid them in my room, at the back of the property. Lily never noticed because they stayed quiet during the day, and I only let them play when you were at work. William looked at Eleanor and saw not a criminal, but a young woman who had sacrificed everything for children who weren't even hers, who had used her own salary to feed them, who had risked her job to protect them, who had cut up her own clothes to dress them. They're my daughters, he murmured, the reality finally sinking in through the shock. They're my girls. The four children looked at each other, confused but hopeful. And for the first time since he had entered that room, William allowed a tear to slide down his face. But before he could say another word, before he could fully process this impossible revelation, the mansion's doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times insistently. Eleanor paled. I wasn't expecting anyone. William walked to the front door, still in a state of shock, and opened it without thinking. On the other side stood Margaret Ashford, his mother-in-law, elegant as ever in a beige linen suit, a designer handbag hanging from her arm. William, dear, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I needed to talk to you about... She stopped mid-sentence upon seeing her son-in-law's expression. What happened? You look pale. Then her eyes moved past him, to the dining room where the 4 girls were still sitting. Margaret Ashford froze. The handbag fell from her arm, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. All the colour drained from her face. She brought a hand to her chest, staggering slightly. William caught her by the arm, worried she was going to faint. Margaret, he called. But the woman didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the 4 girls as if she were seeing ghosts. And it was in that moment that William knew. By her reaction, by the way her hands trembled, by the look of guilt spreading across her face. You knew, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You knew they were alive. Margaret Ashford closed her eyes, and when she opened them again they were filled with tears. But she said nothing. She didn't have to. Her silence was all the confirmation William needed. The silence that fell in the mansion's entryway was deafening. Margaret Ashford remained paralyzed, her hands still trembling, her eyes fixed on the 4 girls, who were now huddled fearfully behind Eleanor in the dining room. William watched her, feeling a mixture of shock and rage growing inside him, like a wave about to break. Come in, he said, his voice too controlled, dangerous. I think we have a lot to talk about. Margaret bent down slowly to pick up her handbag, her movements as stiff as a puppet's. She followed William into the living room, keeping her distance from the girls as if they would burn her if she got too close. Eleanor remained in the dining room, protective, an arm around each pair of girls. William closed the living room door and turned to his mother-in-law. How long? William, I can explain. How long have you known my daughters were alive? His voice rose, echoing off the walls. How long, Margaret? The older woman sat down heavily on the leather sofa, seeming to age 10 years in seconds. From the beginning, she whispered. From that night at the hospital. William felt his legs give way again. He had to hold on to the back of an armchair to keep from falling. 5 years. For 5 years you let me believe my daughters were... that they hadn't survived. You don't understand, Margaret began, her voice taking on a defensive tone. You were destroyed, William, completely shattered. Isabel was gone, and you could barely breathe. You had a company to run, a 1-year-old baby to raise on your own. How were you going to care for 4 more premature, fragile babies who needed constant intensive care? That wasn't your decision to make, William shouted, all his pent-up emotions finally exploding. It wasn't your choice to make. They were my daughters. I was protecting you. Margaret stood up as well, tears now streaming freely down her face. When the doctors came to me, desperate because they had made a terrible mistake, I saw an opportunity to spare you even greater suffering. You would have killed yourself trying to care for 5 small children alone. Your career would have been over. Your mental health would have completely shattered. So you decided for me, William said, his voice now low, more frightening in its coldness than when he was shouting. You decided I wasn't capable, that I wasn't strong enough, that I didn't even deserve the chance to try. Margaret held out her hands in supplication. I told the doctors the family couldn't handle it, that it would be better for everyone, including the babies, if they were put up for adoption. They could have proper homes, parents who were prepared, who could give them the attention they needed. Proper homes? William laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Did you see those children in there, Margaret? Did you see their patched-up clothes? The way they eat as if they're not sure when they'll have food again? Are those the proper homes you provided? I didn't know they would end up in an orphanage, Margaret cried. I thought they would be adopted quickly. 4 healthy babies. Someone would want them. But they weren't adopted, were they? They spent 5 years in an overwhelmed system, suffering, while I had more than enough money and love to give them, while I mourned the loss of daughters who were alive just a few miles away. William walked to the window, looking out at the sunny garden without really seeing it. Do you know what's worse, Margaret? It's not just that you made that decision. It's that for 5 whole years you watched me suffer. You watched me visit their empty graves every month. You watched me cry on the birthdays that never happened. And you never, not once, had the decency to tell me the truth. I thought I was doing the right thing, Margaret sobbed. I thought that with time you would recover, move on, maybe find someone new. And you did move on, William. You're fine now. Your company is thriving. Lily is happy. That proves my decision was correct. William turned slowly, and Margaret flinched at the intensity of his gaze. My decision was correct? You think me functioning is the same as being fine? You think working 16 hours a day so I don't have to think, so I don't have to feel is moving on? He approached his mother-in-law, each word coming out with surgical precision. I didn't move on, Margaret. I survived. And the only reason I survived was Lily. But I could have had 5 daughters. 5 reasons to wake up in the morning, 5 smiles to welcome me home. And you stole that from me. Margaret sat down again, burying her face in her hands. What are you going to do now? Now? William laughed again, that empty sound. Now I'm going to do what you thought I wasn't capable of doing 5 years ago. I'm going to be a father to my daughters. They don't know you, Margaret said, raising her face. You're a stranger to them. Besides, legally they're still in the custody of the orphanage. You're going to face a legal battle that could take years. Then I'll fight. And if I contest it? Margaret's voice was small, but the threat was clear. What if I hire lawyers and argue that you're an absentee father, that you work too much, that you didn't even know your daughters existed? I can make this very complicated for you, William. The silence that followed was glacial. William looked at the woman who had been like a second mother to him after Isabel's passing, and he saw a stranger. Get out of my house, he said calmly. William, get out of my house. Each word was pronounced with a coldness that made Margaret shudder. And don't. Come back. Ever. You can't banish me from my granddaughters' lives. I can and I will. Lily can visit you if she wants, when she's older, and can decide for herself. But those 4 girls, you lost any right to them the moment you abandoned them 5 years ago. Margaret stood, trembling with anger and pain. You will regret this. You're going to need me. The only thing I regret, William said, opening the living room door, is ever trusting you. Now leave before I call my lawyers and find out if there's any way to press criminal charges for, say, what you did. Margaret walked to the door, stopping beside her son-in-law. I did it out of love, to protect you. No, William replied, looking directly into her eyes. You did it out of fear. Fear that I couldn't handle it. Fear of losing control. Fear that your daughter was gone and you couldn't control what happened next. But do you know what your fear cost? 5 years that I will never get back. Margaret opened her mouth to reply, but there was nothing left to say. She picked up her bag and left, her high heels echoing on the marble until the front door closed behind her with a definitive thud. William stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process everything. Then he heard a small sound and turned. Eleanor was at the entrance to the dining room, the 4 girls clinging to her skirt. Is she gone? Eleanor asked softly. William nodded, feeling the weight of it all fall on his shoulders. He walked slowly to where they stood and for the first time truly looked at his daughters. 4 pairs of identical eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He knelt, getting down to their level. "Hello," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My name is William, and you are my daughters." The girls looked at each other, confused. The one with the birthmark took a shy step forward. "Are you our real dad?" she asked, her voice small but clear. William felt something break inside his chest. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm your real dad, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there, that I didn't know. For everything." The girl thought for a moment, then asked the question William would never forget. "Are you going to send us back?" The tears William had been holding back since he first saw the girls finally fell. "Never," he promised, his voice breaking. "I will never send you away. You are my daughters, and this is your home now." "Forever?" another girl asked. "Forever," William confirmed. Eleanor was crying now too, a hand covering her mouth. The 4 girls looked at each other again, some silent understanding passing between them, and then together they took a step towards William. He wrapped them in a clumsy hug, 4 small bodies pressing against him for the first time. And in that moment, despite all the pain, despite all the anger, despite the 5 stolen years, William felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt whole, but he knew this was just the beginning. Margaret had made a clear threat, and he knew his mother-in-law well enough to know she didn't bluff. If he wanted to keep his daughters, he would have to act quickly and decisively. He looked up at Eleanor, over the girls' heads, and saw the same understanding reflected in her eyes. The battle was just beginning. Night fell over New York City as William sat in his study, staring at the illuminated city through the top-floor windows. The girls had finally fallen asleep in the guest room, emotionally exhausted from the chaotic day. Eleanor was with them, refusing to leave them alone even for a moment. William had a bottle of whiskey on his desk, but he hadn't touched it. He needed to keep a clear head. For the past 5 years, whenever he faced an impossible business problem, he resorted to the same strategy: cold analysis, resource assessment, and flawless execution. He needed to apply that same logic now. The problem was simple to define: 4 daughters who were biologically his, legally in the custody of the state, and a vengeful mother-in-law who could turn any legal battle into a prolonged nightmare. Margaret had resources, connections, and worse, she was right on one crucial point. William was a stranger to these girls. He opened his laptop and started researching. Adoption processes, custody, paternal rights. The more he read, the more his frustration grew. Even with DNA tests proving paternity, the process could take months, perhaps years. And during that time, the girls could be returned to the orphanage, especially if Margaret filed a challenge. Soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Eleanor entered hesitantly, still wearing her simple work clothes. "Are they asleep?" William asked. "Yes, it was difficult. They have nightmares. They wake up scared, thinking they're back at the orphanage. But they finally drifted off." Eleanor sat in the chair across from his desk, looking small and vulnerable. "Mr. Sterling, I need to say something." "Go on." "I know I made a terrible mistake by hiding the girls here. I should have told you from the start. If you want to fire me, I completely understand, but please—" Her voice broke. "Please don't let them go back to that place. They've suffered so much, they're finally starting to feel safe." William studied the young woman before him. 23 years old, no family, no significant resources, and yet she had risked everything for 4 children she found by chance. There was something remarkable about that kind of courage. "Eleanor, I'm not going to fire you. In fact, I need your help." She looked up, surprised. "Margaret wasn't bluffing when she threatened to contest my custody," William continued. "She has money, lawyers, and a valid argument. I'm an absentee father who works too much. Besides, the girls don't know me. A judge could very well decide they'd be better off in foster homes or under state supervision until I prove myself capable." "But you're their father." "Biologically, yes, but legally. It's complicated. They were declared deceased on the official record. They were sent into the adoption system. There's paperwork involved, processes to follow. While all this unfolds, where do they stay? Eleanor bit her lip, thinking. Could you file for emergency custody? I could, but Margaret could argue that I'm unfit, and then we'd have an evaluation, investigations, visits from social workers. All of that takes time, and during that time, they suffer, Eleanor completed softly. William stood and walked to the window. Below, the garden was illuminated by soft lights. He could offer these girls everything: financial security, education, opportunities. But what they really needed was something money couldn't buy: immediate stability and unconditional love. You started an adoption process, he said, turning back to Eleanor. How long ago? 5 months, but they told me it would take at least 2 years, maybe more. And you did this while earning a nanny's salary, living in a staff room? Eleanor nodded, embarrassed. I know I don't have much to offer, but I love them. From the first day I saw them in that orphanage, I felt I needed to protect them. William returned to his desk and sat down, an idea beginning to form in his mind. It was radical, perhaps even crazy, but the more he thought about it, the more sense it made. Eleanor, I'm going to ask you a question that might sound absurd, but I need you to consider it seriously. Yes, sir. Marry me. The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor sat completely still, as if she had turned to stone. What? She finally managed to whisper. William leaned forward, his mind already working on the details. Think about it. If you're my wife, you would legally be the girl's stepmother. We would have a consolidated family unit in the eyes of the law. Your pending adoption would become irrelevant because they would be in a home with their biological father and a maternal figure who has already demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to them. But that's insane. It's pragmatic, William corrected. You love these girls. You've sacrificed for them for months. I'm their biological father, but I'm a stranger. You're the bridge between me and them. Together we would form a family unit that no judge could easily contest. Eleanor stood, pacing back and forth. You're talking about marriage, a real one, not a sham or something? It would be a legal and real marriage, but it would also be a partnership. I'm not asking for love or romance. I'm asking for an alliance to protect these children. You would continue to have your own life, your privacy, but in the eyes of the law and society, we would be a family. And Mrs. Ashford, she could still contest it. She could try, but she'd have a much harder time arguing against an established family than against a single father. Besides, you've already started the adoption process, showing prior commitment. That would strengthen our case. Eleanor stopped pacing and looked at William with an intensity he hadn't expected. Why would you do this? You could hire the best lawyers, fight in court, eventually win. Eventually. And in the meantime, my daughters suffer. In the meantime, they live in uncertainty, not knowing if they'll stay or be sent back. I lost 5 years with them, Eleanor. I won't lose another single day if I can help it. But marrying a nanny, you're a millionaire businessman, people will talk. They'll think horrible things. William laughed without humor. Let them talk. My company won't collapse because I married someone society deems unsuitable, and frankly, after what Margaret did, I've stopped caring what people think. Eleanor sat down again, her hands trembling slightly. This would change everything, my entire life. It would, William agreed. But hasn't it already changed? You brought 4 children into your life. You sacrificed your salary, your time. You risked your job. You're already committed. To them, Eleanor. This would just make that commitment official. And what if it doesn't work out? What if the girls don't adapt, or if we find we can't work together? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But at least we will have given them a chance to stay together, to have a family. Isn't that what you want? Eleanor closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. William could see the conflict playing out on her face. Finally, she opened her eyes and met his gaze. I need assurances. Name them. If we do this, I want full autonomy over the girls' care. I won't just be a figurehead, I will be their mother in every sense. Agreed. In fact, I'm counting on it. You know them better than I do, and I want this to be treated as a real partnership. I won't be your employee who happens to wear a wedding ring. You would be my wife. You would have full access to the family's resources, a voice in important decisions, complete respect. Eleanor nodded slowly. And if we eventually want to go our separate ways, we'll have a prenuptial agreement that ensures your financial security and rights concerning the girls. You will never be left destitute, no matter what happens between us. You've thought of everything, she observed. It's what I do. I solve impossible problems. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You know what's funny? My mother always said I'd marry a rich man. She just didn't specify it would be under such bizarre circumstances. William felt a tension he didn't even know he was holding release. So, is that a yes? It's a yes, Eleanor said, her voice firm now. But not for me. I'm doing this for those 4 girls upstairs who deserve a family, a chance, a better life. I'm doing this because I already love them as if they were my own. Then we have an agreement. William extended his hand, and Eleanor shook it. The grip was firm, sealing a partnership that was as unconventional as it was necessary. When? She asked. As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if we can manage it. I need to make some calls, pull some strings, but the faster we make this official, the faster we can begin the legal process of formalizing the girl's custody. Eleanor stood looking slightly dazed. I'm getting married tomorrow to my boss. To save 4 children we discovered today are his daughters. This sounds like the plot of a soap opera. It does, William agreed, but it's our reality now. She walked to the door but stopped before leaving. Mr. Sterling, you can just call me William. If we're getting married, I think we can dispense with the formalities. William, then, she corrected, a small smile on her lips. Thank you for trusting me, for choosing the girls above all else. Thank you for finding them, for being brave enough to save them when no one else did. After Eleanor left, William returned to the window. Outside, the world kept spinning, oblivious to the revolution happening inside that mansion. In less than 24 hours, he would have a new wife and be fighting for custody of 4 daughters he didn't even know existed this morning. It was madness. It was risky. It was completely unconventional. But for the first time in 5 years, William Sterling felt he was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. The next morning arrived with a flurry of activity the Upper East Side mansion had never seen. William had spent the night making calls, pulling favors, moving the gears of influence he had built over the years. By sunrise, a judge was on his way, a family law specialist was waiting in the living room, and a series of documents were being prepared. Eleanor gently woke the girls, explaining in simple terms what would happen that day. They didn't fully understand the concept of marriage, but they understood the essence. Aunt Eleanor and the man they said was their father were going to make a promise so they could all stay together. Forever, the smallest one asked, her eyes still puffy with sleep. Forever, Eleanor promised, feeling the weight of that word. William sent a trusted employee to buy suitable clothes for the girls. When 4 simple but beautiful white dresses arrived, the girls touched them with reverence, as if they were made of glass. They had never had new clothes before. For Eleanor, William offered a dress of his late wife's that was still in storage. She gently refused. That wouldn't be appropriate. That dress belongs to your memories. Instead, she chose a simple beige dress from her own wardrobe, the best she owned. William wore a dark suit, formal but not overly celebratory. They didn't want it to look like a grand celebration. It was a union of purpose, not passion. The judge, a middle-aged man named Arthur Finch, arrived at noon. He was a longtime friend of the Sterling family and knew William's story. When he saw the 4 identical girls, his expression shifted from professional curiosity to genuine shock. William, I heard the most extraordinary things on my way here, but to see it with my own eyes. It's all true, Arthur, every word. The judge spent the next hour listening to the full story. Eleanor told of finding the girls at the orphanage. William explained Margaret's betrayal. The orphanage documents were presented. showing the babies had been admitted exactly 5 years ago, the same week William believed he had lost his daughters. "I'm going to need DNA tests," Arthur said finally. "I can't process a custody request without biological proof." "Already arranged," William replied. "A medical team is coming this afternoon to collect samples. The results will be ready in 72 hours. "And the marriage? William, do you understand that this looks overly convenient?" "I understand how it looks," William said calmly. "But look at those girls, Arthur. Look at what Eleanor has done for them. She sacrificed everything for children who weren't even her responsibility. If that isn't the basis for a lasting partnership, I don't know what is." Arthur studied Eleanor, who was holding 2 of the girls on either side. "Miss Vance, has Mr. Sterling coerced you in any way? Are you doing this of your own free will?" "I am," Eleanor answered firmly. "I love these girls. I would do anything to ensure they stay safe and together. If marrying William is what needs to be done, then that's what I will do." The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. Let's proceed." The ceremony was held in the living room, with the windows open to let in the sunlight. There were no flowers, no music, no guests besides the lawyer serving as a witness, and Lily, who watched everything with wide, confused eyes. The 4 girls stood in a semicircle around William and Eleanor, their small hands intertwined. The judge opened the civil code and began to read the formal words of the ceremony. "William Sterling, do you take Eleanor Vance to be your lawfully wedded wife, promising to love, respect, and honor her in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" William looked at Eleanor. She seemed too small and too young for the weight she was about to take on, but there was strength in her eyes, a determination he recognized because he saw the same thing in the mirror every day. "I do," he said. "Eleanor Vance, do you take William Sterling to be your lawfully wedded husband, promising to love, respect, and honor him, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Eleanor took a deep breath. At that moment, one of the girls squeezed her hand, and she looked down to meet 4 pairs of hopeful eyes. "I do," she said, her voice clear. "The rings?" the judge asked. William hesitated. He hadn't had time to buy rings. But then he had an idea. He took the diamond watch from his wrist, a gift from his late wife, and placed it in Eleanor's hand. "I don't have a proper ring for you," he said softly, "but this watch represents time. And time is what we are promising each other. Time for the girls, time to build something real." Eleanor looked at the watch, knowing it was worth more than she would earn in 10 years. Then, to William's surprise, she took a worn, simple red thread bracelet from her own wrist. "My mother gave me this before she passed," she explained. "She said that as long as I wore it, I would be protected. I want you to have it, because now you need protection too. The protection of knowing someone is by your side in this battle." William took the thread bracelet and tied it to his wrist. It looked absurd next to his expensive suit and designer shoes, but there was something profoundly meaningful in that contrast. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the judge announced. The 4 girls began to clap, not fully understanding but sensing that something important had happened. Lily joined in, smiling. William and Eleanor looked at each other, strangers united by extraordinary circumstances, now legally married. There was no kiss, no romantic embrace, just a firm handshake and a mutual understanding. "Welcome to the strangest family in New York," William murmured. "Better strange than broken," Eleanor replied. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork. The lawyer explained the next steps, formally requesting custody, presenting the DNA results when they were ready, preparing for possible challenges. William signed document after document with Eleanor by his side, now legally Eleanor Sterling. In the afternoon, the medical team arrived. The DNA collection was quick and painless, just a swab on the cheek of William and each of the girls. The children found it funny, making faces as the nurse collected the samples. "Results in 72 hours, the doctor confirmed. But I can tell just by looking that the resemblance is remarkable." When everyone had finally left, the mansion fell quiet again. It was early evening, and the girls were exhausted from the eventful day. Eleanor took them for a bath, a task that revealed more about the orphanage's conditions than any report could. They were terrified of water. The smallest one started crying when she saw the full tub. "It's going to run out," she sobbed. "All the water always runs out." "It won't run out, sweetie," Eleanor whispered, kneeling beside the tub. "We have plenty of water here. All the water you'll ever need, always." It took half an hour to convince the four that it was okay, and when they finally got into the warm water, with soap bubbles and rubber toys Eleanor had improvised, they laughed. It was the first time William, watching from the doorway, had heard them laugh. The sound was like music, like healing, like everything that had been missing from his life without him even knowing it. Later, when the girls were finally asleep, spread out on the king-sized bed in the guest room like starfish, William and Eleanor met, in the kitchen. She was making tea, he was just watching. "They have so many traumas," Eleanor said softly. "They're going to need patience, time, a lot of love." "How do you know so much about it?" William asked. "Because I was a traumatized child once too. After my parents passed, I stayed with relatives who didn't really want me. I learned to read the signs, to understand what children who have suffered need." "And what do they need?" Eleanor turned to him, the teacup between her hands. "Consistency. They need to know that tomorrow will be like today, that the food won't run out, that no one will send them away. They need routine, predictability, certainty." "I can give them that," William said. "I can give them stability." "You can," Eleanor agreed, "but they also need something money can't buy. They need someone who's there when they wake up from nightmares, someone who notices when they hide food out of fear, someone who understands that when they're too quiet, it's not because they're okay. It's because they're terrified of being a bother." William felt the weight of those words. "I don't know how to do that." "Then we'll learn. Together," Eleanor said simply. "I'll teach you how to understand the girls. You'll teach me how to navigate this world of wealth and privilege I'm now in. Partnership, remember?" "Partnership," William repeated. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two strangers who now shared a last name and an impossible mission. "You know what's funny?" Eleanor finally said. "I woke up this morning a nanny. I'm going to sleep a wife and a mother of 4. Life changes fast." "Too fast sometimes," William agreed, looking at the red thread bracelet on his wrist. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "And you?" "Me too. But I'd be more terrified if we did nothing and the girls suffered for it." William nodded. The next 72 hours would be the longest of his life, waiting for the results that would confirm what his heart already knew, and after that a legal battle that could drag on for months. But looking at Eleanor, seeing the determination in her eyes, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. The 72 hours dragged on like weeks. William tried to maintain his work routine, but his mind was constantly at the mansion, with the 4 little girls who were rediscovering what it meant to have a home. Eleanor established a careful structure: breakfast at the same time every day, playing in the garden in the morning, lunch together, a nap in the afternoon, more playtime, and then dinner as a family. The word family still sounded strange to William. He watched from his study as Eleanor played with the girls in the garden, teaching them to jump rope, to make makeshift sandcastles, simple things they had never experienced. Lily, initially confused by the sudden appearance of 4 identical sisters, quickly adapted, becoming a 5th participant in their games. The girls still didn't have official names. At the orphanage, they were just called by numbers: 1, 2, 3, and 4, based on their birth order. William knew they needed proper names, identities, but he was waiting for the DNA results before taking that definitive step. On the morning of the 3rd day, the phone rang. It was the clinic. "Mr. Sterling, the results are ready. Would you like to come pick them up, or shall we send them over?" "I'll pick them up myself," William said, his voice surprisingly calm considering how his heart was racing. He drove to the clinic in Midtown Manhattan, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. He knew what the results would say. He was absolutely sure. But still, that sealed envelope represented the difference between hope and reality. The doctor in charge, Dr. Evelyn Reed, received him in her office. She had a professionally neutral expression, but there was something in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, I rarely see cases like this in my career," she began, sliding the envelope across the desk. The results are conclusive. William opened the envelope with slightly trembling hands. His eyes scanned the numbers, the charts, the technical terminology. And there, in bold, probability of paternity, 99.99%. They are your daughters, the doctor confirmed unnecessarily. But there's more. The analysis shows that the 4 girls are monozygotic quadruplets, genetically identical. This is extremely rare, Mr. Sterling. It occurs in approximately 1 in every 15 million births. William stared at the documents, feeling the weight of the words. His daughters. His 4 miraculous daughters who, against all odds, had survived. "Is there anything else I need to know?" he asked. The results also include comparisons with Mrs. Isabel's DNA, which you provided from old hospital records. The maternal match is also conclusive. There is no doubt whatsoever about the parentage of these children. William thanked her and left the clinic, holding the envelope as if it were made of crystal. In the car, before starting the engine, he allowed himself a moment of pure emotion. He rested his head on the steering wheel and cried. He cried for the loss, for the discovery, for the impossible miracle that were those 4 little girls. When he arrived home, Eleanor was waiting on the porch. She said nothing, just looked at him, with a question in her eyes. William held up the envelope. "They're my daughters, officially, scientifically, unquestionably mine." Eleanor let out a sigh of relief she didn't even know she was holding. "So now we can do everything," William completed. "We can give them names. We can start the legal custody process. We can build a real family." They gathered the 5 girls in the living room. Lily already knew the 4 were her sisters, but the others were still processing everything. "Girls," William began, kneeling to be at their level, "I have very important news. The EMM tests have confirmed what my heart already knew. You are my daughters, my girls, and that means you're staying here forever. No one is going to take you away. This is your home now." The smallest of the quadruplets, the one who was always the quietest, took a step forward. "For real forever?" "For real forever," William promised, a lump forming in his throat. "So, can we have names?" another asked shyly. "Real names? Not numbers?" Eleanor knelt beside William. "How about we choose them together? Would you like to choose your own names?" The girls looked at each other, excited but nervous at the idea of so much freedom. "I want to be Grace," the first one said. "I've always liked that name." "Grace is beautiful," Eleanor agreed. "And you?" she asked the second. "Faith. I want to be Faith." "Hope," the third one said quickly, as if she had been thinking about it for a long time. The youngest, the quiet one, thought for a long moment. "Can I be Joy?" "Of course you can," William said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy. They're perfect names." That night, William did something he hadn't done. In years, he had dinner with his family. The dining table, which had always seemed too large for just him and Lily, was now perfectly full. 7 people, talking, laughing, sharing stories from their day. Eleanor had prepared a simple dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. But for the girls, it was a feast. They ate slowly now, not with the desperate urgency of the first few days, but savoring it, trusting there would be more. It was Grace who noticed it first. "The rice isn't yellow today," Eleanor smiled. "No, but we can make yellow rice whenever you want. It can be our special dish." "Why was yellow special?" William asked, curious. "It was what I could afford on my salary," Eleanor explained softly. "Cheap yellow rice from the market. But the girls always said it was the best rice in the world because it was made with love." William looked at his daughters, seeing not just what they had lost, but what they had gained. Resilience, gratitude, the ability to find joy in simple things. The peace of that moment was shattered by the doorbell. William frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked to the door, and through the peephole saw Margaret Ashford. She looked different. Her perfectly coiffed hair was slightly disheveled. Her clothes, though still elegant, seemed hastily chosen, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. William opened the door, but stood in the frame blocking the entrance. "What do you want, Margaret?" "I need to talk to you, please, William. Just 5 minutes." We have nothing to talk about. I know I made terrible mistakes, Margaret began, her voice breaking. I know I made decisions that weren't mine to make, but I did it because I love you like a son. William, because I wanted to protect you. Protect me, William repeated, his voice icy. By stealing 5 years with my daughters? By letting them suffer in an overcrowded orphanage while I had everything to give them? I didn't know they would end up in an orphanage. I thought they would be adopted immediately. But you didn't check, did you? You didn't care enough to follow up on what happened to them after you authorized them to be sent away. Margaret began to cry openly now. I was wrong. I know I was. But it was a difficult time, William. You were so broken. I was afraid you wouldn't make it, afraid you would destroy yourself trying to handle everything alone. So you underestimated me. You decided I was too weak, too incapable. That's not it. That's exactly it, William cut in. And you know what hurts the most? It's not just what you did 5 years ago. It's that all these years you watched me suffer and you chose your pride, your certainty that you were right, over the truth. You could have told me at any moment, but you didn't. Margaret held out her hands in supplication. Let me make it up to you. Let me get to know the girls properly. I'm their grandmother, William. I have rights. Rights? William's voice rose. You think you have rights to children you abandoned? To granddaughters you deliberately hid from me? I didn't abandon them. I did what I thought was best. For whom, Margaret? For them? Or for you, who didn't want to deal with the mess, with the complication? The older woman flinched as if she'd been slapped. How can you say that? Isabel was my daughter. I lost my baby in that hospital. And I lost my wife. But unlike you, I didn't give up on her daughters. I didn't decide for them where they should be, who should raise them. William, please, Margaret pleaded. I come from a family of lawyers. I can make this very difficult for you. I can challenge your custody, argue that you're unfit, that you rushed into a marriage with a stranger. I could, but I don't want to. I want us to be a family again. William laughed, a joyless sound. You come to my house, threaten to contest my custody of my own daughters, and expect me to let you into our lives? Are you insane? I'm desperate, Margaret shouted. I lost my daughter. I can't lose my granddaughters too. You didn't lose your granddaughters, Margaret. You gave them away, and now you're going to live with that choice. William, this conversation is over. And to be clear, you are banished from this house and from these lives. I don't want you near the girls. I don't want your money, your lawyers, your justifications. Lily can visit you when she's older and can decide for herself. But Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy, you lost any right to them when you signed those papers at the hospital. You will regret this, Margaret said, the sadness in her voice giving way to anger. You'll need me, and I won't be there. I'll live with that risk, William replied, beginning to close the door. They were Isabel's too, Margaret yelled. She would have wanted me to be a part of their lives. William paused, the door half closed. When he spoke, his voice was low, but filled with emotion. Isabel would have wanted her daughters to be loved, protected, and kept together. You failed on all those counts, so don't you dare use her name to justify your choices. He closed the door, cutting off Margaret's sobs. He stood there for a long moment, listening to her footsteps recede, the sound of a car driving away. When he returned to the dining room, Eleanor was alone. The girls had been taken to play in another room. I heard everything, she said softly. Was I too cruel? You were honest. There's a difference. William sat down heavily. She's going to cause trouble. I know Margaret. She won't take this lying down. Then we'll be ready, Eleanor said, placing her hand on his. We have the DNA results. We have a legal marriage, we have lawyers, and most importantly, we have the girls who love us and need us. She said I'm unfit, that I rushed into a marriage with a stranger, and she's wrong. You didn't marry a stranger. You married someone who has already proven she loves your daughters enough to sacrifice everything for them. William looked at Eleanor, this young woman who a week ago was just his nanny and was now his wife, his partner, the mother of his daughters. How do you stay so strong? Because I have to, because 5 little girls depend on us now, and because, strangely enough, I've started to believe we can actually make this work. William nodded slowly. "I've started to believe it too." From the other room, they heard the sound of the girls' laughter. It was Grace shouting something about Faith stealing her doll, but it was a joyful, playful shout, not one of real conflict. "That sound," William said, "laughter in this house. It's been so long." "Then let's make sure it continues," Eleanor said, standing and holding out her hand. "Come on, let's go join them. The more time you spend with the girls, the harder it will be for Margaret or anyone else to argue that you're an absent father." William took her hand and let her lead him back to his family. His strange, improbable, but increasingly real family. And for the first time in days, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The following days brought a routine William never imagined would be his. He woke to the sound of 5 girls running down the hallway, their loud voices mixing into a chaotic but joyful chorus. Eleanor had established clear rules. Breakfast at 7:30, rooms tidied before playtime, light studies in the morning for the older ones. William began to adjust his work schedule. Meetings that used to happen at 7 in the morning were moved to after 9. He wanted to be there for breakfast, even if initially he didn't know exactly how to participate. He would sit at the table, watching Eleanor serve pancakes to 6 hungry mouths, listening to conversations about last night's dreams and plans for the day. Grace, the oldest by 2 minutes, was proving to be the natural leader. Faith was the dreamer, always lost in thought. Hope had a sharp sense of humor that surprised everyone, and Joy, the quietest, observed everything with eyes far too wise for her age. It was Joy who, one morning, climbed into William's lap without warning. He froze, unsure what to do. The little girl just snuggled against his chest and went back to eating her pancake, as if being in her father's lap was the most natural thing in the world. Eleanor smiled from across the table, and William felt something shift in his chest. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around his daughter. She was so small, so light, so confident that he wouldn't let her fall. "Daddy," Joy said suddenly, trying out the word. "Can I call you Daddy?" William had to clear his throat before he could answer. "You can. Please, you can." And just like that, with that simple word, he truly became the quadruplet's father. A week after banishing her, William received a call that would change everything again. It was from an unknown number, a professional female voice. "Mr. Sterling, this is Nurse Sarah from St. Christopher's Hospital. There's a patient here, Margaret Ashford. She's been in a serious car accident and she's asking for you. She said it's urgent." The floor seemed to drop out from under William's feet. "How is she?" The pause on the other end of the line said it all. "It would be best if you came as soon as possible." William hung up with trembling hands. Eleanor, who was loading the dishwasher, immediately saw that something was wrong. "What is it?" "Margaret. She was in an accident. She's in the hospital. It's serious." Eleanor dried her hands quickly. "You need to go." "I don't want to see her, not after what she did." "William," Eleanor said gently, placing her hands on his shoulders, "regardless of what she did, she was important to you once. She was Isabel's mother. You'll regret it if you don't go." William knew she was right. He hated that she was right, but she was. St. Christopher's Hospital was on the other side of the city. William drove on autopilot, his mind a whirlwind. He was angry at Margaret, hurt, betrayed. But also, beneath all those emotions, there was concern. She had been his mother-in-law for years. She had been a support after Isabel's passing, before everything fell apart. With the revelation about the girls, the nurse led him to an intensive care unit. Margaret was surrounded by machines, tubes, blinking monitors. She looked small in the hospital bed, fragile in a way William had never seen her before. "She's been in and out of consciousness," the nurse explained. "But she insisted on seeing you. Said she needed to talk to you before she passed." The nurse didn't say the words, but William understood. He sat in the chair beside the bed. Margaret's eyes opened slowly, taking a moment to focus on him. "William," she whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "You came." "I came," he confirmed, without warmth but also without cruelty. Margaret closed her eyes, tears trickling down her temples. I was driving, crying. I haven't stopped crying since I left your house, and then, I don't remember, just the noise, the pain, and then I wake up here. Did the doctors say how long you have? William asked directly. Hours, maybe less. Something ruptured internally. They tried to fix it, but... She left the sentence unfinished. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 5 years of history, of love, of betrayal, of pain. I did everything wrong, Margaret finally said. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just scared. Scared you couldn't handle it. Scared of losing you too. Scared the girls would suffer. And in the end, my fear caused more suffering than would have happened if I had just trusted you. Why did you never tell me? William asked, the question that had tormented him. In 5 years, you had countless opportunities. Because with every day that passed, it got harder. How could I tell you, William? How could I admit your daughters were alive after years of pretending? They weren't. Every day the lie grew until it was bigger than I was. You stole 5 years with them from me. I did, Margaret agreed, her tears flowing freely now. And I stole them from myself too. I could have had 5 years with my granddaughters. I could have watched them grow, but I chose fear over faith. William felt his own anger begin to give way to something more complex. He was still hurt, still betrayed, but seeing Margaret like this, so broken, so full of remorse, it was hard to maintain pure hatred. The girls have names. Now, he said softly, Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy. Margaret smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Beautiful names. Isabel would have liked them. They're so much like her. Not just physically. Grace has her stubbornness. Faith has that way of daydreaming that Isabel had. Hope has her sense of humor. And Joy has her eyes, that way of seeing right through people. You already know them so well, Margaret observed. See, you did it. You could have cared for them from the beginning if I had just given you the chance. But you didn't. I didn't, and now I'm leaving without ever having known my own granddaughters, without having asked their forgiveness for abandoning them. William was silent, processing. Part of him wanted to offer forgiveness, to ease her suffering. But another part, the part that still bled from the loss of those 5 years, couldn't. You want me to say it's okay, he finally said. You want me to forgive you, to say I understand. I do, Margaret admitted, but I don't deserve it. No, William agreed. You don't. What you did was unforgivable, Margaret. You destroyed lives. You caused unimaginable suffering. And not by accident, not out of ignorance, but through a conscious and continuous choice to prioritize your own fear over the well-being of helpless children. Margaret sobbed, each word weighing on her like a stone. But, William continued, his voice softening slightly, I also understand that you thought you were doing the right thing. I understand that you acted out of a twisted love, not malice. That doesn't make your actions right, but it makes you human. Flawed, wrong, but human. That's as close to forgiveness as I'm going to get from you, isn't it? It is, William said honestly. I can't forgive what you did to the girls. It's not my forgiveness to give. They are the ones who suffered, but I can acknowledge that you regret it, that you understood, too late, the mistake you made. Margaret gripped William's hand with surprising strength. Take care of them. Love them as Isabel would have. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let fear guide you. I won't. And that young woman, Eleanor, she's special. I saw that in her even through my anger. Treat her well. I do. Margaret closed her eyes, looking exhausted. Can I ask you one last favor? That depends on the favor. Take a picture of the girls for me, just one, so I can see them even if they'll never know me. William hesitated, then took out his phone. He had a photo from the day before, the 4 girls in the garden laughing as Eleanor chased them in a game. They were pure joy, pure life. He showed the photo to Margaret. She looked at it for a long moment, memorizing each face, each detail. They're beautiful, she whispered. They're Isabel in 4 different versions. Thank you, William. Thank you for letting me see them even like this. The monitors began to beep erratically. Nurses rushed in, but Margaret raised a weak hand, stopping them. No, let it be. It's time. She looked at William one last time. I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than words can say. Tell the girls, no, don't tell them anything about me. Let them grow up without the weight of my betrayal. Let them be happy. Margaret, promise me. Promise you won't let my shadow darken their lives. William squeezed her hand. I promise. Margaret smiled, looking finally at peace. You're a good man, William Sterling. Better than I deserved. Better than I understood. She closed. Her eyes and the grip of her hand weakened. The monitors kept beeping, but slower now, more spaced out. And then, with a long sigh, Margaret Ashford was gone, taking the weight of her choices and her regrets with her. William stayed holding her hand for a few more minutes, processing the complexity of his feelings. Anger, relief, sadness, freedom. All at once, a jumble of emotions that would take time to sort through. When he finally left the hospital, the sun was setting, painting New York City in shades of orange and red. William called Eleanor. She's gone, he said simply. I'm sorry, Eleanor replied, and there was genuine sincerity in her voice. I am too, not for who she was at the end, but for who she could have been, for what we all lost because of her choices. Come home, Eleanor said softly. The girls have asked for you 3 times. Joy said she won't go to sleep until you get here. I'm on my way, William said, feeling something warm expand in his chest. I'm coming home. And that's exactly what he did. He drove home, where 5 little girls and 1 extraordinary woman were waiting for him, where despite all the chaos and pain and complication, there was something that finally looked like a family. That night, William slept with Joy snuggled in one arm and Grace in the other, both having insisted on sleeping in his room because Daddy was sad and needed hugs. Eleanor had stood at the door smiling at the scene before retreating to her own room, and for the first time in 5 years, William Sterling felt that maybe, just maybe, he was right where he was supposed to be. The following months were a journey of discovery and challenges that William never imagined he would face. With Margaret gone, the threat of a legal challenge vanished, but that didn't mean everything would be easy. The girls carried invisible scars from their years in the orphanage, wounds that didn't heal simply with love and material security. It was Faith who first revealed the depth of the trauma. One night, Eleanor found the girl hiding bread inside her bedroom closet. Not just a few pieces, but a small mountain of food she had been secretly hoarding for weeks. Faith, sweetie, Eleanor said gently, kneeling beside the girl. Why are you saving food? Faith looked down, ashamed. At the orphanage, sometimes the food ran out. If you didn't save some, you went hungry. I always saved some for the others, for Grace, Hope, and Joy. Eleanor's heart broke. My love, there will never be a shortage of food here, never. You can eat whenever you want, as much as you want. You don't need to hide it. But what if it runs out? Faith whispered, tears in her eyes. What if one day you don't have any more money and can't buy food? Eleanor pulled the girl into a hug. Your father is very rich, sweetie. Very. We have enough food for years and years, and even if the money ran out someday, I would work. Your father would work, but you would always have food. Always. But words weren't enough. Eleanor and William had to prove it through consistent actions. They started having meals at fixed, predictable times. Eleanor would show the girls the always full pantry, let them help with grocery shopping, and allow them to see that there was abundance. It took 3 months for Faith to stop hoarding food, and when she finally did, it was because she trusted. She trusted that there would be a tomorrow, that there would be lunch, that there would be security. Hope had her own demons. She would wake up every night at 3 in the morning, on the dot, terrified. William found out why when Eleanor explained that at the orphanage, the caregivers did rounds at 3 a.m. and would often wake the children for checks. They had to prove they were okay, Eleanor explained. Answer questions, sometimes even get out of bed. Hope developed anxiety around that time. William started sleeping with his bedroom door ajar. When Hope woke up, at 3 he would be there, walking down the hall as if by coincidence. Oh, you can't sleep either, want some warm milk? They would sit in the kitchen, lit only by the stove light, sharing warm milk and cookies. They didn't talk much. Hope just needed to know that waking up in the middle of the night didn't mean trouble, didn't mean inspections, didn't mean fear. Grace, the leader, had the most subtle but perhaps deepest trauma. She never cried, never asked for help, never admitted to being scared or sad. She had learned in the orphanage that being strong meant surviving, that her sisters depended on her to keep her composure. It was during a fall in the garden that it all came to a head. Grace slipped and scraped her knee badly, blood running down her leg, but she didn't cry. She just sat on the grass, biting her lip hard, trying to get up on her own. William ran to her, scooping her into his arms. "It's okay to cry, Grace. It hurts. It's okay to feel pain." "I can't," she said through gritted teeth. "I have to be strong for the others." "Not here," William said firmly, carrying her inside. "Here you can be a child, you can cry, you can ask for help, you can be weak sometimes. I'm the adult now. I'm strong for all of you." Grace looked at him, processing his words. And then, for the first time since William had met her, she cried. She cried for the pain in her knee. She cried for the years of having to be too strong. She cried for the relief of finally being able to be just a 5-year-old child. William held her while Eleanor cleaned the wound, and when Grace finally stopped crying, she whispered, "Sorry for being weak." "You're not weak," William corrected. "You're the strongest girl I know. But even strong people need to cry sometimes. Remember that." Joy, the quietest, revealed her trauma differently. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she always asked for permission. "May I have some water? May I go to the bathroom? May I play with the doll?" Eleanor realized that in the orphanage, everything required permission. The children had no autonomy over their own basic needs. Joy had internalized this to the point where she felt her very existence needed to be authorized. "Joy," Eleanor said one afternoon, sitting with the girl, "this is your home. You don't need to ask permission for normal things. You can drink water when you're thirsty. You can go to the bathroom when you need to. You can play with your toys. But what if I bother you? You never bother us, my love, never. Your presence here is a gift, not a nuisance." It took time, infinite patience and constant repetition, but slowly, Joy began to allow herself to exist without apologizing for it. William learned more about fatherhood in those months than he could have in years under normal conditions. He learned that trauma isn't cured with instant love, but with daily consistency. That children who have suffered need predictability, routine, constant proof that they are safe. Eleanor was his teacher on this journey. She understood because she had lived something similar. She knew the signs, the triggers, the small victories that signified real progress. "Look," she said one night, after all the girls were asleep. Faith ate everything on her plate today without saving anything. Hope slept until 4 instead of waking up at 3. Grace asked for help reaching a book instead of trying to climb the shelf herself, and Joy went to the bathroom without asking permission. "They're small things," William observed. "They're huge things," Eleanor corrected. "Each of those things represents a layer of trauma being peeled away. It represents trust being built. It represents healing." William looked at Eleanor in the soft light of the living room. She was barefoot, her hair casually tied up, wearing one of his old t-shirts because it was comfortable. Not glamorous at all, just real. And something in him stirred, a slow but inevitable realization that this woman was not just his partner in the mission to save the girls. She was extraordinary in her own right. "You're amazing with them," he said softly. Eleanor smiled, embarrassed. "I just do what any mother would." "No, most people wouldn't do what you did. They wouldn't sacrifice months of salary. They wouldn't risk their job. They wouldn't marry a stranger. They wouldn't have the patience you have with every trauma, every setback." "They're worth it," Eleanor said simply. "They are," William agreed, and then without much thought he added, "And so are you." Eleanor looked up, surprised. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition that perhaps this partnership, which began out of necessity, was turning into something deeper. But before they could explore that moment, they heard light footsteps on the stairs. It was Grace, holding her favorite blanket. "I had a nightmare," she said without shame or apology. "Can I sleep with you guys?" William and Eleanor exchanged a look. They had separate rooms, maintaining the appearance of a respectful but not romantic partnership. "Come on," William said, holding out his arms. "Let's all sleep in my room. We'll have a slumber party." Minutes later, the three of them were settled, in the king-sized bed, Grace between them. And when Faith appeared saying she had a nightmare too, followed by hope and then joy, the bed became crowded with small, trusting bodies. William looked at Eleanor over the girls' heads. She was smiling, that tired but genuine smile of someone who knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. And in that moment, surrounded by his 5 daughters and the woman who had become so much more than a partner of convenience, William Sterling allowed himself to believe in something he hadn't believed in for a very long time. He believed in family. He believed in second chances. He believed that maybe, just maybe, the bad things that had happened had led to something better than he could have ever imagined possible. Outside, New York City continued its frantic life. But inside that Upper East Side mansion, inside that room with a bed full of sleeping girls and 2 adults protecting their dreams, there was peace. And for the first time in years, William slept without nightmares. 6 months after the wedding, life in the Sterling mansion had found its own rhythm. The girls were enrolled in a nearby private school where Grace quickly excelled in math. Faith discovered a love for drawing. Hope made everyone laugh with her made-up stories, and Joy, surprisingly, revealed a talent for music. William had completely adjusted his work routine. Important meetings only happened during school hours. He left the office at 5 p.m. without exception to be home when the girls returned. His team was initially taken aback, but the results spoke for themselves. William was more focused, more efficient, more creative. Having something to come home to made him better at everything he did. Eleanor blossomed in ways she herself hadn't expected. She was no longer just the nanny or the new wife. She was the mother, the organizer, the heart of the home, but she was also becoming more. William had insisted she study, that she pursue her own dreams while the girls were at school. She enrolled in an online pedagogy course, discovering a passion for early childhood education. "I want to open a school one day," she confessed to William one night. "A school for children who've been through what our girls went through. A place that understands trauma, that knows how to heal while it teaches. Then, you'll open one," William said simply. "When you're ready, I'll finance the whole thing. It will be your school, your project." Eleanor looked at him, touched. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything for you," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart race. Over the past few months, the dynamic between them had subtly changed. Little touches that lasted a second too long, glances that meant more than words, conversations that stretched into the early morning after the girls were asleep. They still kept separate bedrooms, still treated each other with the courtesy of partners, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper growing between them. It was Lily who noticed it first. Now 7, she watched the adults with keen eyes. "You like each other," she declared one day at breakfast. William nearly choked on his coffee. "What?" "You and Aunt Eleanor. You look at each other when you think no one's watching, just like in the movies." The 4 younger girls giggled, but there was curiosity in their eyes too. Eleanor blushed. "Lily, it's not like that." "Yes, it is," Grace agreed, ever the observer. "Daddy smiles differently when Mommy Eleanor is around." Mommy Eleanor. They had started calling her that naturally, without anyone suggesting it, and every time William heard those words, something in his chest tightened in a good way. "And Mommy Eleanor gets happy when Daddy comes home," Faith added. "We can tell." William and Eleanor looked at each other, surprised at how transparent they had been. "Well," William cleared his throat, "your Mommy Eleanor and I are friends. Good friends." "Friends who are married," Hope pointed out logically. "That's not normal friends." "It's complicated," Eleanor tried to explain. "Why?" Joy asked with her characteristic honesty. "You like each other. You're married. Why can't you just like each other?" The simplicity of the question left the 2 adults speechless. That night, after all the girls had finally fallen asleep, William found Eleanor in the garden. She was sitting on the swing he had installed, looking at the stars. "May I?" he asked. Eleanor made room and he sat beside her. For a long moment they just swung in silence. "The children aren't wrong," William finally said. "They're not?" "No, I like you, Eleanor. Not just as a partner, not just as the girl's mother. I like you. Eleanor stopped, swinging, turning to face him. William, I know this marriage started as a strategy, as a necessity. But over the past few months, you've become more than that to me. You've become the person I want to share good news with. The person whose opinion I value most. The person who makes this house feel like a home. I feel the same, Eleanor admitted softly. In the beginning, I did it for the girls. But now I do it for us. For you. For me. For the family we've become. William took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. So what do we do about it? I think we stop pretending we're just partners, Eleanor said, smiling. I think we let this be what it's becoming. And what is it becoming? Something real, something true. William leaned in, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. But Eleanor didn't pull back. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was as if something that was always meant to be had finally clicked into place. The kiss was gentle, tentative, but filled with promise. When they parted, they were both smiling. The girls are going to be insufferable, William murmured. They're going to say they were right all along. They were, Eleanor laughed, and they'll remind us of it every day for the next 10 years. I can live with that. Me too. That night, for the first time since they married, they slept in the same room. Not out of obligation, not for appearances, but because they wanted to. And when Joy appeared at 2 in the morning with a nightmare and found them together, she just smiled and crawled in between them, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A week. Later, William's lawyer called with news that changed everything. William, the custody process has been approved. With the lack of contestation after Mrs. Ashford's passing, the judge fast-tracked everything. Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy are officially your daughters. Legally, formally, permanently yours. William had to sit down. Even though he knew it was inevitable, hearing the words aloud hit him in a way he hadn't expected. It's official. Completely. I received the paperwork this morning. I'll send copies over, but I wanted you to know immediately. Congratulations, William. You are now officially the father of 5 girls. When he hung up, William sat in his study, processing. He thought of Isabel, of how happy she would be to know their daughters were safe, loved, and together. He thought of Margaret and her tragic choice. He thought of how life can change in an instant. And he thought of Eleanor, who had turned that change into something beautiful. He left his study and found the whole family gathered in the living room. The girls were doing homework, Eleanor helping Faith with her math. The scene was so normal, so perfectly ordinary, that William felt tears well up. "Girls," he said, and they all looked up. "I have some news." "Good or bad?" Grace asked cautiously. "Very good. The best. I just got a call from the lawyer. You are now officially my daughters, forever. No one can change it. No one can contest it. We are a real family, on paper and in every other way." For a moment, the girls just processed it. Then Grace started to cry, and when Grace cried, it was because something important had happened. Faith followed, then Hope, then Joy. William knelt, and all 4 ran into his arms. Lily joined the hug, and Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, wrapped her arms around all of them. "We're a family," Faith sobbed, "a real family." "We always were," William said, "but now the whole world knows." "No one can take us apart?" Joy asked, needing to hear it again. "No one, ever. You are mine, I am yours. We are a family." They stayed like that for long minutes, a tangle of arms and happy tears and relieved laughter. And when they finally separated, Grace wiped her eyes and said, "Can we celebrate with yellow rice?" Everyone laughed. The yellow rice had become a symbol. For them, a reminder of where they came from and how far they had come. "We can," Eleanor said, "but this time we'll make it together, all of us, a family recipe." And that's exactly what they did. That night, the mansion's kitchen was crowded with 7 people making yellow rice. William, who had never cooked in his life, learned to measure spices under Eleanor's guidance. The girls helped as they could, more of a hindrance than a help, but no one cared. When the rice was ready and they sat at the table, William looked around. His family. Imperfect. Unconventional. Built from tragedy and brave choices, but real. More real than anything he had ever had. A toast, he said, raising his glass of juice, to family, to this crazy, beautiful, impossible family that somehow became my whole life. To family, they all repeated, their glasses clinking. And as they ate yellow rice, laughing and talking and just being, William Sterling understood something fundamental. True wealth wasn't in his bank account, his mansion, or his business empire. It was in this moment, in these people, in this love that grew stronger every day, true and unbreakable. Summer arrived in New York City, bringing intense heat and school vacation. William decided to do something he had never done before, take an entire month off. His team nearly fainted at the announcement, but he was firm. His family needed him, and he needed them. Eleanor suggested a trip to the beach. "The girls have never seen the ocean," she said. "It would be amazing for them." William rented a house in Cape Cod, a quiet spot far from the tourist crowds. It was a simple house compared to the mansion, but it had a garden, a porch with a hammock, and was just a 5-minute walk from the beach. The first time the 4 girls saw the ocean was a moment William would never forget. They stopped on the sand, eyes wide, completely speechless before the vast expanse of blue water stretching to the horizon. "It's so big," Grace whispered, her voice full of reverence. "And it goes on forever?" Faith asked, incredulous. "Almost," William said, kneeling beside them. "It's huge. It goes all the way to other countries, other continents." "Can we touch it?" Hope asked hesitantly. "You can dive into it if you want," Eleanor encouraged. The girls exchanged glances, then Grace, always the brave one, took the first step. The cold water touched her feet and she screamed, but it was a scream of joy. The others quickly followed, and soon the 4 of them were jumping in the waves, laughing in a way William had never heard them laugh before. Lily, who already knew the sea, joined her sisters, teaching them how to jump the waves, search for shells, and build sandcastles. William and Eleanor watched from the shade, their hands intertwined. "Look at them," Eleanor murmured. 6 months ago they were in an overcrowded orphanage without hope. Now they're free, happy, alive. "Thanks to you," William said. "You saved them. You saved all of us." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected. "Together." The days at the beach were magical. William taught the girls to swim, spending hours in the shallow water, holding each one as they learned to float. Eleanor made elaborate sandcastles, created games on the beach, and told stories under the beach umbrella. At night, they would build bonfires on the house's private beach. They roasted marshmallows, sang songs, and told stories. The girls, who used to be so afraid of the dark, now ran along the sand lit only by the stars, their laughter echoing in the night. It was during one of these nights that Joy asked a question that changed everything. "Daddy," she said, sitting in his lap, "why did Grandma Margaret give us away?" William froze. They had avoided this topic, but he knew it would come up eventually. "It's complicated, my love," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Did she not like us?" Grace asked, her voice small. "It wasn't that," William said quickly. She made a decision she thought was for the best, but she was wrong." "She thought you couldn't take care of us?" Faith asked, ever the perceptive one. William sighed. He couldn't lie to them, but he also didn't want to completely poison Margaret's memory. "Your Grandma Margaret loved you in her own way," he said carefully, "but she was afraid. Afraid that I couldn't take care of you all by myself. Afraid that you would suffer. And that fear made her make a bad decision." "But you did it," Hope said. "You managed to take care of us." "With a lot of help from Mommy Eleanor, yes, but your grandma didn't know that. She misjudged." "Did she regret it?" Joy asked. William thought of Margaret on her hospital bed, broken and full of remorse. "Yes, very much. She passed away wishing she could have done things differently." The girls were quiet, processing. "I think I forgive her," Grace finally said, "because if she hadn't done what she did, maybe Mommy Eleanor wouldn't have found us, and she's the best mum in the world." Eleanor, who had been listening in silence, started to cry. Grace immediately grew concerned. Did I say something wrong? No, sweetie, Eleanor said through her tears. You said something very right, thank you. Faith got up and hugged Eleanor. You saved us. Grandma Margaret might have made a mistake, but you fixed it. So in the end, everything turned out okay. The simplicity of that childish logic was both touching and profound. In a way, Faith was right. Without Margaret's terrible choice, without the girls ending up in the orphanage, without Eleanor finding them, this family would never have been formed. Sometimes, William said slowly, bad things lead to good things, not because the bad things were necessary, but because brave people choose to turn pain into love. Like Mommy Eleanor, Joy said. Like Mommy Eleanor, William agreed, looking at his wife with a love so intense it almost hurt. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep, exhausted from their day at the beach, William and Eleanor walked along the sand under the full moon. Do you have any regrets? William asked suddenly. About what? About all of this. Marrying me out of necessity, taking on 5 children at once, turning your entire life upside down. Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him. William Sterling, are you crazy? Regrets? This is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Even though it started as a transaction, as a strategy. Especially because it started that way, Eleanor said, because it proves that real love can grow from anywhere. We didn't need a movie romance or perfect dates. We needed a common purpose and a will to build something together. William pulled her into a hug. I love you. I don't know when it happened exactly. I can't pinpoint the moment. But I love you. I love you too, Eleanor whispered against his chest. I love you, I love our girls, I love this strange and beautiful life we've built. They kissed under the stars, the waves gently breaking on the shore, and everything seemed perfect. But perfection doesn't last forever. 2 days before they were due back in New York, William received an urgent call from his office. There was a crisis, a serious problem that required his immediate attention. A major investor was threatening to pull millions due to rumors about William's irregular family situation. They're saying you married the nanny to look respectable, his vice president explained. That your daughters are illegitimate, that it's all a sham. The investor is conservative, traditional, and he's having second thoughts about doing business with you. William felt anger boil inside him. My personal life is none of their business. Normally it wouldn't be. But this particular investor is worth $300 million. Losing him could destabilize projects that employ hundreds of people. William hung up and stared out at the sea. Eleanor approached, having overheard part of the conversation. Trouble? An investor is questioning our family, our marriage. He's threatening to pull out. What are you going to do? William looked at her, then at the house where his daughters slept peacefully, happy and safe. I'm going. To call him back and tell him to shove his $300 million where the sun doesn't shine, he said calmly. Because my family is not negotiable. It's not irregular. It's not a sham. It's real. It's mine, and it's worth more than any amount of money. Eleanor smiled, proud. That could be costly. I've already lost 5 years with my daughters because of other people's choices. I'm not going to lose another second trying to please someone who doesn't understand what really matters. He called back and told the investor exactly that, just in more diplomatic terms. The response was predictable. The investor pulled out. When William told his team, he expected concern. Instead, his vice president laughed. You know what, William? We needed this. We needed a reminder that we built this company on values, not just money. If someone can't respect your family, they don't deserve to do business with us. In the following days, something extraordinary happened. The story leaked to the media, but not in the way the investor had hoped. Instead of a scandal, people saw courage. They saw a man choosing family over profit. They saw a love story born from tragedy and turned into triumph. Other investors came forward, wanting to be part of a company led by someone with such clear values. The value William lost was replaced threefold, but more importantly, he proved to himself and his family that nothing, absolutely nothing, was more important than them. On their last night at the beach, They built a special bonfire. William had a surprise. "Girls, there's something I want you to know. You've made me a better man. You've taught me that family isn't about blood or DNA or legal documents, although we have all of that. It's about choice. Choosing to be present. Choosing to love. Choosing every single day to be a family." He took 5 red thread bracelets from an envelope, identical to the one Eleanor had given him on their wedding day. "These bracelets represent our family. When you look at them, I want you to remember that you are loved, that you belong, that you will never, ever be alone again." He tied a bracelet onto each girl's wrist, then onto Eleanor's hand. She did the same with his, completing the circle. "Now we're all connected," Grace said, admiring her bracelet. "Forever," William confirmed. And as they sat together under the stars, united by red threads and a love stronger than any adversity, William knew with absolute certainty that he had everything he had ever needed. He had family, he had love, he had a home. And that was worth more than all the millions in the world. A year had passed since that fateful day when William returned home to find 4 identical girls eating yellow rice. A year of transformation, of healing, of growth. The Upper East Side mansion was no longer just a large empty house. It was a vibrant home filled with laughter, running, and life. The girls were now 6 years old and flourishing in ways even Eleanor hadn't dared to dream. Grace was still the leader, but she had learned to ask for help when she needed it. Faith no longer hid food, trusting there would always be enough. Hope slept through the night, her nightmares finally having ceased, and Joy spoke freely, without asking permission to exist. Lily, now 8, was the perfect older sister, protective but not smothering, always including the 4 in everything. William barely recognized the man he was a year ago, the work-obsessed businessman who used long hours at the office to avoid an empty house had transformed into a present father. He knew his daughter's teachers by their first names, never missed a school performance, and was always there for math homework and scraped knees. And Eleanor, his Eleanor, had transformed from a shy nanny into a confident wife, a dedicated mother, and was about to realize her dream. William had bought a plot of land near the mansion where she would build her school. The architectural plans were nearly complete, incorporating everything Eleanor had learned about childhood trauma and healing. "It's going to be a place where children who have suffered can learn to be children again," she explained during a meeting with architects. "Classrooms full of light, gardens to play in, quiet corners for when they need peace, and above all, people who understand that behavior is communication." William watched with pride as she commanded the meeting. This woman who a year ago apologized for existing now spoke with authority about her vision, without hesitation, without doubt. The school was scheduled to open in 6 months, and there was already a waiting list of families wanting to enroll their children in a place that truly understood trauma. It was during one of these planning meetings that an unexpected letter arrived. It was from the lawyer who had handled Margaret Ashford's estate. William opened it with curiosity and felt the floor shift beneath his feet as he read. Margaret had left everything to the girls, her entire considerable fortune divided equally among Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy. But it wasn't just money. There was a letter written shortly before the accident that took her to the hospital. "My dearest William," the letter began in Margaret's trembling handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means I have passed without the chance to properly know my granddaughters. This is my greatest regret." William read in silence, Eleanor by his side. "I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I want you to know that every day since I made that terrible decision at the hospital has been marked by remorse. I watched you suffer and did not have the courage to confess. I was a coward." The letter continued, detailing how Margaret had tried to locate the girls over the years, but without success. How she had considered telling the truth 1,000 times, but always backed down. How she lived in agonizing silence, knowing she had destroyed lives with her choice. "I leave my fortune to Grace, Faith, Hope, and Joy, not as payment for what I did, because money cannot repay such a debt. I leave it as an investment in their future, in the life they deserve to have. Use it as you wish, William, for education, for security, for their dreams. I only ask one thing." William turned the page, his heart tight. "Do not let my mistake define their story. Do not let them grow up knowing they were rejected, even temporarily. Let them grow up knowing only that they are loved, deeply, completely, unconditionally loved." The letter ended with a final plea. "And William, if you ever find it in your heart to forgive even a little, tell the girls that their grandmother, despite all her terrible mistakes, loved them, even without knowing them, even from afar. She always loved them." William folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking. "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asked softly. "I'm going to do what she asked. I'll use the money for the girls' future. And when they're older, when they can understand, I'll tell them about Margaret. Not the horrible details, not the extent of the betrayal, but the essential truth. That she made a terrible mistake driven by fear and spent the rest of her life regretting it." "That's generous of you." "It's not generosity, it's a necessity. I don't want our girls to grow up with hatred. I want them to understand that people are complicated, that mistakes are human, that redemption, even if imperfect, is possible." That night, William put the letter in a safe place along with the adoption papers, the DNA results, all the pieces of paper that told the extraordinary story of how this family was formed. One day, when the girls were older, he would give it all to them. But for now, he would let them be just children, happy and carefree, with the painful past being slowly replaced by a joyful present. The following months were marked by small and large celebrations. The quadruplets' 6th birthday was a huge party in the garden, with all their school friends, balloons, a giant cake, and laughter that echoed throughout the neighborhood. William watched from a distance, seeing his daughters run free, confident, loved. It was hard to believe they were the same frightened girls he had found eating yellow rice in his dining room. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked, approaching him. "That a year ago, I was lost. I had everything materially, but nothing that truly mattered. And now I have you, I have them, and I'm the richest man in the world." Eleanor nestled against him. "Do you know what Grace asked me today?" "What?" "She asked if you and I loved each other when we got married, or if we learned to love each other afterwards. And what did you say?" I told her the truth, that we married out of necessity but stayed for love, that sometimes the best relationships don't start with sparks and passion, but with a common purpose and mutual respect that grows into something deeper. Did she understand? I think so. She said it was like planting a tree. You don't plant it because it already has fruit. You plant it because you know that with care and time, the fruit will come. William laughed. 6 years old and already a philosopher. "She learns from the best," Eleanor said, kissing him softly. The party continued until the sun set, and when all the guests had finally left and the exhausted girls were asleep, William and Eleanor sat in the now quiet garden. "You know what I've realized," William said. "Exactly 1 year ago, I would have given anything to avoid the pain of discovering the girls. Margaret's betrayal, the loss of those 5 years, all the turmoil. But now, looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Not even the 5 lost years, not even those. Because if things had happened differently, maybe you never would have found them. Maybe our family would never have formed in this exact way, and I can't imagine a better version than what we have now." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Are you saying you're grateful to Margaret?" "Not exactly. I still think she was wrong, deeply wrong. But I recognize that through her terrible choices, something beautiful was born. Not because of her choices, but in spite of them. That's a mature perspective. It's the perspective of a father who wants his daughters to understand that life is complicated, that we can honor the past without being defined by it, that we can acknowledge mistakes without letting them consume us." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the peace of the night. "William," Eleanor finally said, "there's something I want to tell you. I was waiting for the right moment, and I think this is it." Something in her voice made William sit up straighter. "Is everything okay?" More than okay, she smiled, her eyes shining. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. William stared at her, processing the words. Pregnant? We're having a baby? We are. I found out yesterday but wanted to be sure before telling you. I'm 6 weeks along. William pulled her into a hug, tears of joy streaming down his face. We're having a baby. Our baby. Our family's going to get even bigger. Eleanor laughed through her own tears. From 7 to 8. The girls are going to go crazy. They will. They'll want to help with everything. They'll fight over who gets to hold the baby first. It's going to be complete chaos. I can't wait, William said, kissing her deeply. And in that moment, under the stars, in the garden of the house that had become a home, William Sterling fully understood what he had always known in his heart. Family isn't about perfection. It isn't about how it starts. It isn't about following social rules. Family is about choosing every day to love and be loved. It's about turning tragedy into triumph. It's about finding light in even the deepest darkness. And he had all of that multiplied by 8 now. He had family. He had love. He had a future. And for the first time in his entire life, William Sterling was truly, completely, absolutely happy. The news of Eleanor's pregnancy was met exactly as they had expected, with explosions of joy and 1,000 simultaneous questions from the 5 girls. Grace wanted to know when the baby would arrive. Faith asked if she could choose the name. Hope was worried if the baby would like playing with them. Joy, always the most profound, asked if the baby would love them as much as they already loved the baby. Yes, Eleanor assured, pulling Joy into a hug. This baby will be born into a house full of love. It will have 5 amazing sisters and 2 parents who will do everything to make it happy. 6 sisters, Lily corrected. I count 2. Of course you count, William said, hugging his eldest daughter. You are an essential part of this family. The following months were marked by preparations and transformations. The guest room was converted into a nursery, with the girls helping to choose colors, decorations, and toys. William insisted it be neutral because they had decided not to find out the baby's gender. Let it be a surprise, he said. We've had enough surprises that changed our lives for the better. One more won't hurt. Eleanor's belly grew, and with it her glow. She was radiant, working on the final plans for the school during the day, and being pampered by the girls at night. They insisted on singing to the baby, reading stories to their mother's belly, and giving goodnight kisses to the brother or sister who was on the way. William was in constant awe. He watched Eleanor teach the girls about pregnancy, explaining how babies develop, answering questions with infinite patience. She had become so confident, so self-assured, so different from the shy young woman he had first met. Are you happy? He asked one night as they lay in bed together. Incredibly, Eleanor replied, placing his hand on her belly where the baby was actively kicking. 2 years ago, I was a lonely orphan with no family, no direction, no purpose. Now I have you. I have 5 daughters, a baby on the way, a school about to open. How could I not be happy? I get scared sometimes, William admitted. Scared that it's too good to be true, that something will go wrong. Nothing will go wrong, Eleanor said firmly. We've already been through the hard part. Now we just get to reap the rewards of everything we've planted. Eleanor's school opened 3 months before the baby was due, and it was an instant success. She had created something truly special, a place where traumatized children were seen, understood, and loved back to health. There were therapists on staff, specially trained teachers, and an atmosphere of absolute safety. William watched the inauguration with pride, seeing Eleanor cut the ribbon with tears in her eyes. This is for every child who has ever felt invisible, she said in her speech. For every child who has suffered and thought no one cared. You matter. You are seen. You are loved. The quadruplets were in the front row, applauding enthusiastically. They understood better than anyone what that school meant. When Eleanor entered her 9th month of pregnancy, William became unbearable. He was constantly worried, checking if she was okay, if she needed anything, if the baby was moving normally. William, Eleanor finally said, exasperated but amused, I'm fine, the baby is fine, you need to relax. I can't. Not after what happened with Isabel. Eleanor took his face in her hands. I am not Isabel. This pregnancy is completely different. I'm healthy, the baby is healthy, we're being closely monitored. Everything is going to be all right. William knew she was right, but the fear was irrational, visceral. The thought of losing Eleanor, of going through that pain again, was unbearable. It was Grace who helped him process this fear. The 6-year-old found him in his study one night, clearly worried. "Daddy, are you scared of losing Mommy Eleanor?" she asked directly. William considered lying, but Grace deserved honesty. "I am." "Because Mommy Isabel passed away when babies were born?" "Yes." Grace thought for a moment. "But you know Mommy Eleanor is different, right? She's strong, and besides, if something happens, God forbid, you won't be alone this time. You'll have us. We're a family." William pulled his daughter into a hug, touched by her wisdom. "When did you get so wise?" "I always was," Grace said with childlike confidence. "I just didn't have anyone to listen before." The conversation helped. William was still nervous, but he began to trust that Eleanor knew what she was doing, that the doctors were prepared, that this time would have a happy ending. 2 weeks before the due date, something unexpected happened. Eleanor was at the school, supervising a class, when she felt the first contractions. "False alarm," she said initially, but when the contractions continued, getting closer and closer, she realized it was real. William got the call in the middle of a meeting. He ran out, forgetting his jacket, his briefcase, everything. He picked up Eleanor from the school and went straight to the hospital, calling the babysitter who would stay with the girls. "I don't want them to be scared," he said. "Tell them it's routine, that we'll be back soon with the baby." At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Eleanor was dilating fast, the labor progressing faster than expected. "It's technically your 5th baby," the doctor joked, referring to the quadruplets. "Your body knows what to do." William held Eleanor's hand through the whole process, whispering encouragement, wiping her sweaty face, being the rock she needed. And then, at 3 a.m, with a strong, healthy cry, their son was born. A boy. Healthy, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that promised to be the same shade as Eleanor's. William cut the umbilical cord with hands trembling with emotion. The baby was cleaned and placed on Eleanor's chest, who was crying with joy and relief. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Just like you," William said, kissing her forehead. "You were incredible." They had decided on a name weeks before. Lucas Sterling. When they brought Lucas home the next day, the 5 girls were waiting at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. William introduced them carefully, letting each girl hold their baby brother for a few minutes under supervision. "He's so small," Faith marveled. "You were all like this once," Eleanor said. "Small and perfect and completely loved." "Is he going to like us?" Hope asked with concern. "He's going to love you," William assured her, "because you're the best big sisters in the world." The following days were chaotic, in a wonderful way. Lucas was an easy baby, sleeping well between feedings, but the house was constantly buzzing with activity. The girls wanted to help with everything, changing diapers, giving baths, choosing outfits, singing lullabies. William watched his family with constant admiration. 6 children. 6. He had 6 children now, and he couldn't imagine life any other way. One night, when Lucas was 2 weeks old, William found Eleanor in the living room, nursing the baby while the 5 girls were asleep, scattered across the sofa, having insisted on having a slumber party in the living room. "This scene," he said softly, "is everything I ever wanted without knowing I wanted it." "It's messy," Eleanor observed, looking at the strewn blankets, the toys everywhere, the girls in impossible sleeping positions. "It's perfect," William corrected. He sat beside her, looking at Lucas nursing contentedly. "You know what I realized? Lucas will never know a life without his sisters. He'll grow up surrounded by love from day one. He won't have to wait years to have a family like the girls did." "He's lucky," Eleanor agreed, "and the girls are lucky to have him. And I'm lucky to have all of you." Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. "Who would have thought, right? Less than 2 years ago, you were a lonely businessman, and I was a nanny with no family. Now look at us." "Look at us," William repeated, marveling. Grace stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Faith had her arm thrown over Hope, who was practically on top of joy. Lily slept peacefully, a slight smile on her face. 6 children, a wife who was his partner in everything, a house that was a true home. William Sterling had built a business empire, had millions in the bank, had properties and investments and power. But nothing, absolutely nothing compared to this messy, imperfect, noisy, and absolutely beautiful scene of a family that chose to love against all odds. "I love you," he whispered to Eleanor. "I love you too," she replied. And Lucas, as if understanding the importance of the moment, unlatched and gave a small smile, his first real smile. It was perfect. Everything was absolutely perfect. A full year had passed since the birth of Lucas. A year of first words, first steps, first laughs that filled the house with joy. The girls were devoted older sisters, always competing over who could make Lucas laugh the hardest, who would hold him first, who he loved the most. "He loves us all equally," Grace would always say, being the voice of reason. But more significant than Lucas's birthday was another date that was approaching. The 2-year anniversary of that transformative day when William came home for lunch and found 4 identical girls eating yellow rice at his table. Eleanor had the idea to hold a special celebration. "We need to mark this day," she told William, "not just for what we lost or what we suffered, but for what we gained, for what we've become." William agreed immediately. And so, on a sunny December Saturday, they began preparations for a party unlike any other they had ever thrown. The garden was decorated not with luxury or ostentation, but with simplicity and meaning. Colorful banners made by the girls at school, flowers from the garden arranged in simple vases, a large wooden table where everyone would sit together, and at the center of it all, Eleanor would prepare the dish that had started everything, yellow rice. The girls, now 7, remembered that day perfectly. "That's when our real life began," Faith said as she helped decorate. "It's when we found out we had a dad," Hope added. "It's when Mommy Eleanor became our real mom," Joy completed. "It's when we became a family," Grace finished. Lily, now 9 and increasingly wise, observed, "I think it's when we all found each other. Not just Dad finding you, but all of us finding our place in the world." William listened as he hung the last of the banners, his heart overflowing. These girls, who had seen so much pain so young, had found wisdom and gratitude instead of bitterness. The afternoon of the celebration was perfect. The sun shone but didn't burn, a gentle breeze keeping the heat tolerable. Guests began to arrive, the girls' school friends with their families, William's employees who had become friends, teachers from Eleanor's school, neighbors who had witnessed the family's transformation over the years. But before the party officially began, William gathered just his immediate family in the garden. 8 people now, himself, Eleanor, Lily, Grace, Faith, Hope, Joy, and Lucas, who at 12 months was taking his first wobbly steps. "I want to say something before everyone gets here," William began. 2 years ago, my life completely changed in a single day. I discovered I had 4 daughters I thought I had lost. I met an extraordinary woman who would become my wife. And I understood that everything I thought was important before really wasn't." He looked at each face, memorizing this moment. "I learned that wealth isn't about how much you have, but who you have. I learned that family isn't about perfection, but about choice. Choosing to love, choosing to forgive, choosing to build something beautiful from broken pieces." The girls listened intently. Even Lucas seemed to understand that. Something important was being said. "Margaret made a terrible mistake," William continued, "but through that mistake this family was formed. I won't be grateful for her betrayal, but I can acknowledge that it brought Eleanor into our lives. It brought you girls back to me in a way that might not have happened otherwise." Eleanor took his hand, squeezing it gently. "So today we celebrate. We celebrate the journey, however painful it may have been. We celebrate the love that grew where there was only loss. We celebrate you girls who survived the impossible and still found it in your hearts to trust, to love, to be happy." Grace stepped forward. "Can I say something?" "Always. I remember the day we met you. We were so scared. We thought you were going to send us back. that you were going to punish us for being in your house. But you didn't. You cried. And when you hugged us, it was the first time I felt safe, Faith completed. Loved, Hope added. Home, Joy finished. The four looked at each other, that silent communication only identical twins share, and then said together, "Thank you for being our dad." William had to swallow the lump in his throat before he could reply. "Thank you for letting me be," Lily joined her sisters. "And thank you for giving me 4 sisters at once. Sometimes it's a lot of noise and a lot of chaos, but I wouldn't change a thing." Lucas, feeling he was losing attention, let out a joyful squeal and everyone laughed, breaking the emotional tension. "And you," William said, scooping up his son, "you completed everything. You're the proof that our family keeps growing, keeps expanding, keeps being blessed." Eleanor wiped away her tears. "It's time. I'll get the rice." She returned minutes later with a huge pot of yellow rice. The familiar aroma filled the air, bringing back memories of that first day. "Remember when this was the only rice we could have?" Eleanor said to the girls. "Because it was cheap, simple, all I could afford." The girls nodded, remembering. "Today we have all kinds of rice. White, brown, black, red. We have everything, but we choose this, not out of necessity, but out of love. Because this rice represents our story. It represents humility, sacrifice, love that doesn't depend on material wealth." She served everyone, and when they were all seated at the table with their plates of simple yellow rice, William raised his glass. A toast to the family that wasn't planned but was chosen, to the love that grows in unlikely soil, to second chances and new beginnings, and to yellow rice, which reminds us of where we came from and who we've decided to be. "To family," they all repeated, glasses clinking. They ate together, 8 people plus the guests who had arrived and were welcomed with plates of yellow rice as well. Every person present understood that the simple dish represented something profound. As the party continued with music, laughter, Lucas being passed from lap to lap, William pulled Eleanor aside. "You know what I've realized?" he said. "What?" "That true redemption isn't in reversing what was done, but in transforming it into something better. Margaret can never undo her choices. The girls can never get back those 5 years, but we can choose what we do with what we have now." "And we chose to love," Eleanor said simply. "We chose to love," William agreed. As the sun set, when the guests began to leave and the girls were exhausted, but happy, the family gathered once more in the garden. The red bracelets they all wore glowed softly in the twilight. "This was the best day," Grace sighed contentedly. "Because we're all together," Faith agreed. "Forever," Hope added. "Forever," William promised, as he had promised so many times before, and would promise 1,000 times more. Lucas was asleep in Eleanor's lap. Lily was leaning against William's shoulder, and the quadruplets were snuggled together as they always were. And in that perfect moment, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, William Sterling understood completely that he had found something money could never buy. He had found home. He had found purpose. He had found the true wealth that comes from united hearts, from unconditional love, from a family chosen and carefully cultivated. The yellow rice, which began as a symbol of poverty and necessity, had transformed into a symbol of redemption. Simple, humble, but laden with everything that truly mattered: love, sacrifice, the courage to choose family over fear. And as the stars began to appear in the New York sky, as his family rested around him, William knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, not because it was easy, not because it was planned, but because it was real, it was true, it was his. And that was everything. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of William, Eleanor, and the girls has touched your hearts. This journey of love born from tragedy, of a family built with courage, reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures come wrapped in impossible challenges. If this narrative resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and leave a like, helping us continue to share stories that celebrate the strength of love and family. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life, loss, redemption, and transformative love. Don't miss our upcoming content, and please share in the comments how this story made you feel. Your words fuel our passion for telling stories that matter. Until the next emotional journey.